And I have really mixed feelings. I really do about affirmative action. And I look at a place like Harvard and I'm like, well, it's a private, this isn't like a state school. And that kind of cuts both ways too, right? Because I could make the argument that as a private institution, Harvard should be allowed a lot of leeway, right? They want to accept people because they're from a traditionally or marginalized identity group. They want to give them a little bit of an advantage. Individuals from a marginalized identity group, a little bit of an advantage in the admissions process. I understand that. It makes some sense. But on the other hand, they don't get to discriminate against people of color, right? That would be illegal. You can't discriminate against, if you're a restaurant, you're a private institution, but you have to serve everybody who wants to come into your restaurant who, meets, sort of colorblind rules, right? They have a dress code and they got to pay for their food, but you can't distinguish between who you allow as a customer and whom you don't based on race, religion, ethnicity. You can't do that. That's illegal, and it should be. So should it be that you get a certain preference if you go to Harvard because you're from a particular group? And some would say, well, that's not right. They're not getting a preference. I don't know how else to describe it. If you're admitted into an institution and your grades and your test scores are significantly below that of others, and if you weren't a member of a particular group, you wouldn't get in, I don't know how you call that anything but a preference. Likewise, if you're Asian and you have an SAT score or SAT scores and GPA that are significantly above the cutoff for other groups and you're not admitted, I don't see how to see that thing, but you're discriminated against. You are, as an individual from that group, you're discriminated against. That said, I think we do want a society where the people at the top, the leadership, is relatively diverse. They don't all come from one or two groups. I think a big reason that there's a lot of Jew hatred is because Jews are inordinately successful, affluent, powerful. And that causes a lot of resentment and envy among other groups. And it's understandable that they would be. So I get the desire to have a more colorblind society. On the other hand, because I can play this game all day long, shouldn't nuclear physicists be the ones who demonstrate the most aptitude at nuclear physics? If we're going to have an elite law school where we train the best and the brightest to be lawyers, not that I think we need them to be the best and the brightest, but if we're going to do that, then shouldn't the standards be the same for every group? This article is very interesting because it appears, and there's some question because some people may no longer be identifying themselves on their application by race or by religion or ethnicity. Some people may no longer do that. For example, Asians have in the past not identified themselves as Asian on college applications because they have been told that the schools to which you're applying to Harvard, you're applying to Yale, you're applying to University of Pennsylvania, well, if they see Asian, you're going to be in a pile with a bunch of other Asians who are extremely qualified. And it's going to be harder for you. So many Asians, especially if they're mixed race, so their name might not be like Chun or what have you. They're going to say, let's say their last name is Smith. They're going to say, nothing. They're not going to identify themselves by ethnicity. So we really don't know for sure. But it does appear that the decision by the Supreme Court to outlaw affirmative action has led to a reduction in the number of black students and Latino students at Harvard Law matriculating. Again, I have somewhat mixed feelings about that. I do want the folks who go to Harvard to be viewed as fully deserving based on their individual accomplishments, not because they are a member of a particular group. And I do think that this will be to the benefit of those African Americans and Latinos who are admitted into Harvard, because they will no longer be viewed, or hopefully they won't be viewed, and they shouldn't be viewed as beneficiaries of a policy that provides them with certain advantages. This article also points out that the total number of African Americans going to law school did not decline. It's just that they aren't going to the most elite, the Harvards, the University of Michigans, the Pennsylvanias. So they're going maybe to the Ohio States, which is a good law school. I don't mean to put it down, but I'm just saying maybe more state law schools and the like. Ohio State pops in my mind because they won the football championship yesterday. That could be good. And I'll give you a reason why that is, I believe. So I went to Georgetown Law School, and I was not law review. I had decent grades. I didn't have the best grades. They were good enough. The Law Journal did not have a representative sampling of African Americans. There were a number of black students, but they were not represented on the Law Review, which is where the highest GPA students are invited. Only those with the highest GPA. I didn't make that cut. I wish I had. I didn't. Part of the reason that may have happened is because the African American students who may have done better on SATs or LSATs and college may have gone to the Harvards and the University of Chicago's and the Stanfords and the Cal Berkeley law schools, all that are higher rated than Georgetown. And therefore they can pick and choose a higher, a student who does even better. Now, I'm Georgetown Law School. I don't mean to put it down, but it's not quite at that level. So maybe if those students weren't accepted into Harvard or whatever law school, University of Virginia, then they go to Georgetown, where they're competing against just a notch less brilliant. And they may well do better. And that's one of the points that is made by those who think ultimately the Cal Berkeley decision, or rather the Supreme Court decision, was the correct one. Again, I'm still kind of on the fence. I've made a decision. I'm giving you both views. I will say one more point, though. A huge reason for the pressure to have affirmative action is that if you are admitted into one of these elite institutions, you will live better than other people. You'll have a lot more. You're going to get an offer to one of the best, highest paying law firms. You're going to be tagged as an up-and-comer, someone who may make it big in politics or the business world. So you have great advantages over others because you went to one of those top 3, top 5 law schools, or top 5 business schools, or top 5 medical schools. You get a big advantage over other people. It's society's obligation to reduce that advantage. To say, okay, you know what? You're really smart. You did well in college. You did well in law school. You work hard, obviously. It's okay if you make a little more than everybody else. But you don't get to have that much more. You don't get to accumulate generational wealth, because nobody does. And if you don't go to an Ivy League law school, if you don't matriculate at Columbia just to change the school, but instead you go to, I don't know, Valparaiso Law School, which is a good law school, University of Cincinnati Law School, which is a good law school. You go to one of those schools, you're still going to live fine. If you don't go to law school at all, if you go to plumbing school, you're still going to live fine. You don't go to any grad school. You don't go to any vocational school. You work in a mill. You check people out at 7-Eleven. You're still going to live fine. That's what we need. That's the kind of party that champions that worldview that we need. And neither one does. And that's why we have to go in a different direction, or things will continue to get worse and worse and worse.